Lovely to have you here. And do you think that finally it is going, the world's going to see Benjamin Netanyahu walking away, uh, and accepting defeat? Or does this really depend on the opposition forming a coalition?
Well, he'll never accept defeat. I mean, he's trying in every way he can to do something, but he's on his way out. I mean, it's been a process. It's been a couple of years now, 4 elections, and he hasn't managed to become elected prime minister. Although he's managed to stay in power as kind of the head of a transition government, but this time it looks like it's the end. I mean, even the right-wing parties have gone into a coalition with the left-wing parties, which is almost unheard of here in Israel, against him. So that, the opposition to him isn't only in terms of the left for political reasons, but the very right wing, including right-wing parties to the right of his own party, the Likud, are against his staying in power because of corruption, and he's been in too long, and it's becoming a one-man rule. So I'm not sure the new government's going to function. I think it might last a couple of weeks, maybe even. Because it's a very fragile coalition.
Right.
But the point is that you're getting rid of Netanyahu, hopefully passing a law saying he can't run again because of corruption charges, and then that government can go away, and we can have a real election for a real government.
Has he kind of held on to power because once his term ends, he might face, or he probably will be facing corruption charges? And how serious will that be for him?
No, he's already facing corruption charges. The trial is going on. That's the whole point of everything. That's why everybody is united against him, because the reason he wants to stay in power is in order at some point to get into a position where he can appoint a minister of justice in the government that will then appoint an attorney general who will then close the case against him. You see?
Yeah, very much like the Trump situation in America.
No, that's right. So he's desperate to stay into power because he is guilty. He's going to be tried. He's going to be convicted, but he could very well go to jail. His only chance of getting out is staying in power and doing his manipulations. But it's so transparent and obvious that even within the Likud now, there's beginning to be a sigh of relief that we're going past Netanyahu. There's voices, even in his own party, that wouldn't dare to speak out before, that are beginning to say, let's move on. Because, everybody's just sick and tired of Netanyahu. I mean, not only for corruption, but his whole behavior. And, he's very much, in the end, like Shamir. We had a Prime Minister, Yitzhak Shamir,
yes,
who was well known for doing nothing. He left no legacy. His policy was keeping the status quo, keeping the occupation, keeping Israel strong, keeping our out, just not doing anything. And that's, in a sense, Netanyahu's policy as well. So he has no legacy. It's true, he was a good manager, and the economy is doing pretty well, but politically, he leaves no legacy. And I think the right wing would like to move ahead and annex the West Bank, and move on with annexation. And the left wing would like to move ahead and try to get into some kind of a peace agreement with the Palestinians.
So undoubtedly,
but everybody is stuck because of this Netanyahu.
Right. So undoubtedly, when a coalition is formed between the left and the right, they're going to be butting heads with each other because they have totally different ideologies. Right. And what's that going to mean for the Palestinian people?
It doesn't mean, it just means the status quo. It means more of the same. No, they have an agreement, you see. There's an agreement. I mean, it's coming together. It could happen in the next week, this government. It's coming together. But the agreement is, I don't know how you can do it in this part of the world. The agreement is we're not going to deal with controversial issues. We're only going to deal with domestic issues. Health, the economy, education, infrastructure, those kinds of issues. And the big issues like occupation, the peace process, and Palestinians, and all, that we have no agreement on, and we're going to try to leave those aside. Now, I don't know if that's possible because the real world, it comes into your life whether you want it to or not. But that's the idea. But we're not going to deal with those issues, and we're just going to deal with internal issues.
So they're just going to leave those very burning issues hanging in the air. In the meantime,
Exactly.
the poor Palestinian people are still, same old for them, if not worse.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the tragedy is that they have the Palestinian Authority Israel has a Palestinian Authority to support it. So that, there's no, the Palestinians, especially in the West Bank, aren't able to raise any kind of civil society opposition or effective resistance or a political program, because they have this dead hand of the Palestinian Authority plus the Israeli occupation on their heads, you see, and so they're really kind of paralyzed. And that, of course, again, is Israel's strategy. It's simply to keep everything going steady state. Once in a while, you have to hit Gaza over the head, but basically keep everything steady state, low intensity conflict, kind of. And in the end, you keep your occupation without having to get into a peace process, without having to make concessions. So that this whole stalemate thing, which is not obviously good for Palestinians, very much serves Israel. And there is no international pressure on Israel. You see, that's the point. I mean, look at the United States, look at the other. There's no pressure on Israel to change its policies. There's no sanctions. And so Israel, really has a get out of jail free card.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Palestinian resistance will not take this, lying down. They probably will also intensify with, the meager resources they have at their disposal, and also try and get as much support and backing from the international community. Whether that is forthcoming is another story altogether. But it seems if this goes ahead, things will start intensifying from, the Palestinians' point of view. Right. I mean, more and more of their land is being usurped.
That's right.
And they are, what we're seeing happening in Palestine right now is really wholesale genocide, and this can't continue.
That's right. But the question of resistance, you have to resist. But the question of resistance is to what end? What's the point? Where are you going with resistance? You can't just resist. What we're lacking today is a political program. We have to have a Palestinian articulated political program, which we don't. The Palestinian Authority is still talking about two states, which has been dead for it's never been alive. There's never been a two-state option, and so I'm involved with a Palestinian-led initiative that's called the One Democratic State Campaign, and we're saying the only way out of this mess is by decolonizing Israel, very much like South Africa.
Wow.
Decolonizing Israel, ending the apartheid regime over the whole country, not just the occupied territory, which is only 22% of the country.
Wow.
Over the whole country, and establishing here a democracy of everyone that lives here. That's the political program that in the end, if we don't press that, the resistance doesn't really mean much.
For the first time, I've heard someone being pretty honest about that situation. Other people have never, ever verbalized it. Is that a possibility?
That's the problem.
My last question, how far down the line, how many years do you think it's going to take for us to see that possibility becoming a reality?
Look, the good news is, and you see this now after what's happened, the international community, the civil society, meaning the people. Don't forget, when the ANC was fighting apartheid, you guys went to the international civil society. You didn't go to governments that weren't supportive. The civil society all over the world has moved to back the Palestinians. Israel is very isolated in the court of public opinion. But what you need is the Palestinians to articulate a political program. And the Palestinian, I think the civil society of Palestine, not the Palestinian Authority, unfortunately, together with the international civil society, the grassroots of the world, they could mount a campaign. I believe, without being Pollyannish, I really believe that within a few years you could accomplish that. I think the Palestinians have a political strength that they're not aware of in terms of the international community. But right now our movement is very small. And until the Palestinians get on board and begin to articulate their own political plan, nothing's going to happen.
Professor Jeff Halper, on that very positive note, a future positive note, we're going to leave it there.
Right.
Thank you indeed for your time, and have a
you
good
can
day.
look at our website at onestatecampaign.org.
Brilliant. We'll do that. Thank you indeed. Go well. It's exactly 9:47. This is News and Views with me, Julie Ali. My Lord.